I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me.
I do try to stay positive, but I also stay real. And this is fucking real right now. I look wild. Good morning. It's like a little past 7:30 in the morning. I'm about to finish wrapping up, packing the rest of my suitcase. I don't got a ton of time. So I'm heading to the airport. We got back really late. I didn't vlog again last night after the podcast, which I think in the shortest way I can sum up my entire experience is the name of the podcast really lived up to itself. Whatever. The name of the podcast really lived up to itself, whatever. I knew what I was walking into. I made a calculated decision just to see what would happen. And I will probably come on here later and talk about the whole experience, but I do want to say my favorite part of the experience, and that was meeting Farah, who was the girl who was sitting next to me. She came in like not long before filming, and she sat down, and I turned and I looked next to her, and I was like, you look familiar. Like, I couldn't remember what I knew her from, but I was like, I know her face. Like, she looks familiar to me. And she like just casually mentioned like, oh, I do like stuff on the internet. You might have seen that or whatever she said, something to that effect. And I was like, yeah, I think so. I couldn't recall until sometime within the middle of it was like a 5 or 6 hour live. It was a lot. At some point in the middle of that, she just like was talking about like people's reactions to her skits on TikTok. And then I went, oh, my dad just messaged me about the podcast. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to talk about my whole experience because I have a lot to say. But when she said that she did the satirical skits, they popped in my head. I was like, oh, I've binge watched your TikTok. Like, I think you're really funny. Like, I might follow you. I couldn't remember. Like at least on TikTok. And I looked at her, I was like, oh, so by the time it wrapped, soon as like the cameras were off, I turned to her and I was like, hey, Farah, I remember now, like, I really love your TikToks. Like, I binge watched them. Like, I think you're really funny. Like, I just like kind of told her what I thought of her. Cause I was like, oh, I mean, I have this opportunity to tell her that to her face. And, I think she was really closed off and guarded because, me too, like in that room, you can't go in there assuming anybody is your friend. And so like once we started that conversation, she kind of like smiled and was just like a lot more interactive with me. And she said some stuff to me that really like made my heart happy, because also during the podcast when they pulled up my clips, she was like, oh, I saw that on Twitter. I was like, that's cool. And then she and I were talking, and she told me, she was like, yeah, this is some of the freshest content this content has had in months. It's the first time in a long time that I've learned anything new at all in regards to the topic that I brought up. And that just was like, from her was such a massive compliment. And she was just really nice. And she said a couple other things. I'm tired and I have to pack, so I'll try to remember to say them later because I don't want to forget. Y'all know my short-term memory. And then she like basically like started to look me up and like followed me without, I didn't ask her to follow me or anything, but like I felt so complimented by her because she also was just like, you really held your own. And she said that you did, like, she was just really nice and she was just like really cool. And that was that was the highlight of the experience. I also really liked Misty. I didn't interact too much, but she was really nice to me and very warm. And yeah, we can talk about the men later. I'm gonna go. I'm glad I came to California. Overall, the net positive was worth it. I'll see y'all later. Hi friends, it is Monday night. I am finally home after traveling all day. I left the airport at 10:30 Pacific time and got home at like about 9 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm just kind of like, what's reality right now? I've decided that I'm going to kind of upload some things out of order. So I'm going to upload this next. I've got a ton of vlog footage from being in Cali, from pre-interview, and then very little post, mainly because by the time we got back to my friend's place, it was like 1 a.m. Pacific time, and I had to wake up at like 7:30 in the morning. So I literally like came home and like crawled into bed and just like passed out. I was so tired. And so I've got a lot I want to say about my experience being on the Whatever podcast and experiencing like a real life misogynistic troll. Like that was just like a lot. And it was really interesting, like the entire experience, and I have opinions, and I want to share them, and I want to share them coming from a place to make it very clear that like I'm not like hating on the host of the podcast or like thinking people need to get canceled or whatever. Like that's not at all the way I want to go about it. But I do want to talk about my experience from beginning to end, including like off camera and everything. I did vlog like some random conversations with my friend, and like I haven't gone through any of that footage yet. So like I was having a fucking grand old time. I'm gonna probably upload a separate vlog with just like a bunch of footage that can't be monetized. Not for anything like super scandalous, but just because of like TOS, with like music and other things. And so, and I'm going to include my Instagram story highlight reel for people that aren't on my Instagram, but I was posting on my stories. And I was just fucking feeling myself, having a grand old time. Stopped off at like the recreational weed store that my friend highly recommended. And like the prices were just fucking awesome. And I got some really cool stuff. I get to the podcast location. I get up pretty quick. Oh, I mean, it took them a few minutes to let me in, but I got up pretty quick. And pretty much like I was just, I don't know, I was trying to be myself and just like calm, cool, collected, and like open to the possibility that like these people weren't judging me, you know what I'm saying? And so I get in and I'm just kind of like confused, and just kind of like really overwhelmed. I was really overwhelmed. I had to like sign my release form to be on the podcast, whatever. He the host didn't show up right away. Like he came in a little bit later, and I think he was really stressed out and kind of pissed off because a bunch of people flaked last second for this specific panel. And so that kind of really changed the vibe of what the panel was supposed to be. And they kind of rushed things last minute. And so like I noticed like he didn't like say hello to me, but also he didn't really say hello to the other people. Like he didn't really greet anybody. He was just kind of like walking around, and I don't think he even spoke to me until really like the cameras were rolling. If he did, it was very like brief. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like if I was hosting a podcast, I would at least like greet myself and like, you know, handle that differently. But at the same time, I know what I was signing up for. That's the thing I do want to say and address, because I feel like a lot of the people who like follow me really would not normally vibe or watch that kind of content, and like I highly respect that. Like if you support me and you don't watch that podcast interview, like I'm not going to hold it against you, because it's a very different type of anything I've really ever done before, and it's very different from like how I normally live my life, which is one of the reasons why I decided to do it. I knew that agreeing to do something like that was a calculated risk. It was an opportunity to go to California, which I'd never done. It was an opportunity to challenge myself and an opportunity to learn some stuff about myself. And I feel like all of those things happened. I made small talk with some of the people that were on the podcast, and like I felt like Mason, who is like, he's like the 27-year-old like virgin Christian male that they had on the panel. I felt like he was really respectful towards me, like in the person-to-person interactions. Probably one of the only men there really that was like that, besides the off-camera dude. I think his name is Nick. Other than that, I mean, fuckface. I'm not saying the man's name. I feel that someone who treats me the way that he treated me on that podcast is someone that's not really worth naming. And so he has a platform. I realized like after the fact, I was like, I think I've heard his name before, probably just like mentioned somewhere on the internet about somebody with really bad takes, because boy does he have a lot of bad takes. And it was just really interesting because for like the first few hours or the first couple hours especially, I was choosing to just be like engaging and like receptive to a conversation and open-minded to like the possibility of like respectful discourse. And he was the only person that did any kind of low blows towards anyone. And he is truly like the epitome of everything that I've been fighting online these past 10 years. And there was at some point during our conversation where it kind of just hit me that I was looking into like the face of all of the hate and vitriol that I've gotten over the years. Like the manifestation of that is embodied in a person like him. And while he may be married and not by definition an incel, I believe that there are a lot of people who subscribe to incel culture who are not necessarily involuntary celibate. And he definitely fits the bill for that. The moment that I saw him, like when he walked in, he never said a single word to me off camera. And to me, that kind of behavior speaks volumes. And frankly, was I interested in speaking to him off camera? Of course not. But before I knew who he was, before anything, like when he first walked into the room, initially I was just, I bottom line, bad vibes. And I mean, his behavior ended up really reconfirming that for me. But the highlight of my interaction with him for me was a few hours in, like it was, I think, close, like right before the 4-hour mark, when he, like someone asked a question about mandatory paternity testing, and I didn't really feel a strong stance on that question. I just was kind of like answering it and just kind of figuring it, like trying to figure out what to say, because I mean, it's just a situation that I'm not really gonna probably ever run into, because I don't want to have children in this lifetime. And the question ended up coming up like, do you want children or whatever, or are you going to have children or whatever? And I said no. And then immediately, and it wasn't caught on camera, I don't know if this was purposeful or not, but they switched the camera over as he did the motion. He went like, yes, like to me, essentially not procreating for a man like him, as I'm sure is what he would say. And I called him out on it, and so did Misty. And it was a point that, it was at that point that I felt like the gloves came off. And I really wanted to make sure that I carried myself in a way that I knew I wasn't going to give them what they wanted, because there were multiple times that he tried to neg me and I just stared him down because I was like, you don't bother me. And it was about around, like I mentioned, the 4-hour mark that I realized how much I bothered him. He like was so angry that I rated myself an 8, and he was so triggered by my confidence, because all of the men on this panel are, they flat out, all of them said that, because I asked them, I felt it was important to highlight this distinction, that they felt modesty is a better attribute to have in a woman than confidence, that they would rather have a non-confident woman who was like insecure and, you know, didn't believe in herself, who was modest, versus a woman who's confident. So like, of course he fucking doesn't like me. Like, not only am I confident, but I'm fat and confident. And it was just, I feel, a very powerful moment for me to realize that this man did not actually affect me at all, to the point that when I left afterwards, I didn't cry. I wasn't sad. I didn't like have a meltdown. I didn't like feel triggered at any point in time at all. The only time I was even irritated or borderline, like, I don't know if necessarily angry is the right word, but just like where I really felt like the gloves came off were when was it the mother thing? I think that was the one thing that like that felt very like a personal attack. And you're like, we were directly all told that you can't fucking do that. Like, that's part of the rules of the podcast. And I felt like the moderator, if I'm being honest, wasn't very good at moderating. And I feel like whether it's a purposeful bias towards the men on the panel or just a laissez-faire attitude towards the conversation, I'm not sure. I feel like he was definitely purposefully moderating Farrah over fuckface. And yeah, I just think that there was more that could have been done. And also, I don't know if it was just like, I don't know if it's always like that, or he was just kind of off the ball because he was like thrown off from the circumstances around that particular panel's casting or whatever. But I will say that I feel like the podcast was really professional, especially in like dealing things behind the scenes, like making sure that I was reimbursed for travel, things like that. I felt like Nick was like good at his job in terms of like being accommodating, and like when he graded me, like I didn't feel judged, you know. But I definitely had moments where I was sitting there and I was like trying to figure things out, and I was like, I can't tell if I am being negged or not, because like, you know, I am autistic, and so I was bullied enough that I've learned to be pretty good at like telling when people are like trying to be like fake nice to be funny. And there was just like very clearly some moments where I just kind of I was like unsure of the standing, but how I got through those moments was just focusing on the fact that like I don't actually care or value the opinion of people that don't really see me as a full actualized person. And the other guy on the panel that I haven't really mentioned, he didn't really talk a whole hell of a lot. I think his name's like Q-Tip or something, I don't know. He didn't really speak a lot, but when he did, I just really didn't feel like it had any major impact or any true importance to the conversation. They were all just kind of general misogynistic talking points. But he's I don't know if he's always quiet like that or if it was different. I don't know. But all that to say, I don't really regret doing it because I feel like the experience was overall a net positive. And I realized that, like, just how much I've grown this past year, let alone this past 3 years, because there was a time where if I had entered in that room, I would have crumbled under the pressure of the situation. And I wouldn't have been able to focus, and I would have been triggered, and it would have been an inconceivable action to put myself in a situation with someone who I would normally never share a table with. And I felt like doing that, having those conversations, allowing myself to stand in my authenticity and stand in who I am, in spite of other people's thoughts or actions towards me. I feel like that was a moment of true clarity and growth with what I experienced, like being gang stalked online and being so heavily bullied, not just in high school, but like on the internet and in my past, and how much those things used to affect me. I haven't read a single comment on the video. I watched back probably 3/5 of it. I don't really think I'm going to because I think like the after show portion was really weird. I don't understand like how that happened, to be honest with you. Like, I don't understand. I do not understand. Oh, I just lost my train of thought, but whatever. I think I'm gonna include the clip from this morning because I didn't really vlog while I traveled very much. But I think I'll include that clip like in this video because I talked in more detail about my experience with Farah. Because I didn't realize it till midway through the podcast how I knew her, but as the moment I saw her, I was like, you look so familiar. And it was because I had been binge watched her content in the past, and I really liked her TikToks, and she made these very satirical skits, and I just heavily vibed with it because it was like satirically on topics of things like feminists that were like very clearly like satirical anti-feminists, like, and that was kind of the point of the joke, right? And I mean, I'm someone who likes Bo Burnham, and so I like that kind of thing. And she's like an OnlyFans model, and by the end of it especially, I realized I think we have a lot in common in a lot of ways, even though we're probably clearly very different people, right? And she said some things to me that really like impacted me and made me like feel heard and like understood. And like on the podcast, when they pulled up the clip of me, she goes, "Oh, I saw that on Twitter," and I was like, oh my god, first of all, I didn't even know that was on Twitter. So I'm interesting. I don't even know of any tweets that I was mentioned in or anything, so that's crazy. But she told me that she said that I brought some of the freshest content she's seen on the podcast, and like 6 months or since she's been on it or something like that. And she was just really like receptive to me, and she started looking me up and followed me like before I even followed her on Instagram, because I think I had mainly seen her on TikTok, so I wasn't following on Instagram. Of course I followed her back, because I was just like, I think the reason I didn't click right away is it had been a minute since I'd seen some of her videos, and I really liked her comedy and like her personality, and she I like that she goes on there, and I just felt like, I felt like really aligned with her, and I really like Misty, and I'm blanking on her name. I think it was Kimmy. She didn't really talk a whole lot, but she was sweet, and I couldn't figure out if Maddie was like doing the mean girl shit to me or not. I really couldn't tell. Like it, and to me, like that's the things that the thing that's the most difficult about being autistic is like I really couldn't figure out with the way she was behaving. But the thing that I noticed the most about her was like when I was rewatching the podcast on the flight on the way home, because she was also someone who really didn't, I noticed, wasn't really talking as much, and I realized that she didn't really spoke unless she was spoken to, which is probably why she was the only girl getting compliments on the podcast, because I think I don't really know much about her standpoints on a lot of things, honestly, because again, she didn't really say a ton. And those are just kind of like my thoughts and experiences. There was only really one person that I felt any like true negativity towards, and it was because of like the personal attacks. And I think at one point he essentially called me crazy, and was just really disrespectful and truly triggered by not only my like presence, but I think he was literally triggered by the concept of my existence. And honestly, I love that shit, because I think that it's so sad to be such a narrow-minded human being, to be such a judgmental, harsh, unkind person who thinks that they can redefine kindness because of their own like egotistical God complex. And for someone to be so painfully average and think that they're so important, can't relate. So yeah, I was playing by the rules, and I didn't really feel it necessary to insult someone in the midst of a discussion. Unfortunately, I wasn't afforded that same respect because I'm a fat woman. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. In terms of all of that, would I go on the Whatever podcast again? I think so. I want to have like an actual conversation more so about dating than all the derailment that happened because of the what happened with the casting. I want to have like an actual plus size panel experience, and I am really proud of myself, and I feel like I am someone who can hold my own, and I'm willing to be a voice that isn't the favored side in a conversation. And I want to be a light in a room full of darkness, you know? And I think that that's what I did. And there's going to be a lot of people that will see me and automatically like never even give me a moment of a chance, whether because I'm a woman, I'm fat, or both, or whatever. But beyond that, some of the, like, a lot of the positivity and messages and support that I've gotten today from the podcast has been really good too, and I'm really, really, really happy that I decided to do this. It made me see things about myself and made me think about things in certain ways that maybe I hadn't necessarily done before. And as long as it remains respectful, like, I am the kind of person that's willing to have conversations with people, even if I don't agree with them, or I just think they're, you know, an alien in terms of, like, their way of thinking is so foreign to me, I don't know how to compute. I just think I also really love podcasts. I love being on podcasts. I like how the one of the biggest differences between, because there's obviously so many differences between what my experience with We're All Insane and with the Whatever podcast. I think the biggest distinction was, like, you know, the first one was about me, and it was just kind of, I didn't have as much, like, direction to go off of, but the panel was, like, a bunch of back and forth and different perspective and topics, and I would have enjoyed it a lot more if that one guy wasn't there. Even though I really didn't like the opinions of, like, the other three a lot of the time, I was just kind of like, sometimes I was looking at them like they had 6 heads, because I just couldn't compute. You know, I didn't feel like they were disrespectful or combative, and it's just so weird to me. It's just so weird to me. And so if I go back, I just kind of don't want to deal with that ever again. So outside of the podcast, I had a fucking the joy that was radiating from me from the first day, and that beach vlog is my favorite vlog that I've ever made. And yeah. There was one thing I noticed in the rewatch that really pissed me off that I didn't hear during, and it was when Fuckface McGee made a comment, because I talked about, it was about the shaming portion, like, when he was trying to say that because I'm a public figure that the world has a right to basically publicly shame and harass and bully me, to be a warning to women to not be like me. I wish I was joking. And I was looking at him like, I mean, truly, like, if it wasn't so sad, it would be funny. You know? Like, that people really subscribe to such horrifically rigid, harsh viewpoints of the world, that they think that is, like, appropriate behavior in any scenario towards anyone. I don't understand, and I never will, and I'm thankful for that. Alright, I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. I will TTYL. Bye.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops.